Good afternoon, Evil, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. On the far edge of the old village, where the mud-soaked lane twisted into dense, whispering woods, stood the eternal tree. Its trunk was wider than any cottage, gnarled into grotesque, shifting faces, eyes that blinked when no one watched, mouths that seemed to whisper secrets best left unsaid. Local lore claimed its roots reached down into the bones of the earth itself, drawing on ancient power older than memory. Villagers passed hurriedly, clutching lanterns like talismans. No one dared linger once dusk settled, for it was said that those who approached seeking answers to their deepest fears vanished without a trace. Old Marta was the first who spoke of it, though no one believed her until the day her daughter, Lissa, stepped through a hollow arch of root into a cavern beneath the tree. Lissa had trembled with curiosity, the same knot in her belly that pulled at her every night, but curiosity won out. She pressed her hand against the pitted bark, and in a breath, she was gone. By dawn, only her bonnet lay crumpled in the leaf-littered circle, its ribbon still fluttering in a wind no one else felt. Soon the whispers spread. Young Ansel, haunted by nightmares of drowning, crept to the tree to beg for freedom from sleep's terror. He carried with him a conch shell and a scrap of waxed cloth, tokens he believed would ward off ill omens. Old Marta watched from her window as he crossed the rope barrier villagers had strung. That night, Ansel's screams echoed through the village, thick, gurgling sounds like water trapped in his throat, until they ceased with a final, rasping sob. In the morning, his bed lay empty, the rope barrier sagged, as though something on the other side tugged gently, inviting the next. By the time Tomas arrived, the village vibrated with unease. He had lost his wife, Helena, in the winter, taken by fever, but grief gnawed at him relentlessly. He ventured to the tree at dawn, lantern in hand, breath visible in the cold mist. The eternal tree loomed, its twisted branches reaching like skeletal arms ready to snatch him whole. He paused at the edge of the clearing, noting the strange hush, the usual dawn chorus silenced, the wind stilled. Ignoring the tremble of his knees, he placed his palm against a face-shaped knot and whispered, "Show me her." The bark shivered under his touch. A low moan slipped through crevices between roots. He stepped closer, drawn by a longing so raw it hurt. Behind him, villagers awakened to panic. Tomas had gone, lantern abandoned at the boundary. Its glow pulsed as though alive, casting grotesque shadows that writhed closer to the trunk. One brave soul, a woodcutter named Yarrick, approached, axe raised, but recoiled when the shadows flared and retreated as if offended. Even the dogs whimpered and cowered, ears flat, as they backed away. At nightfall, a tremor shook the ground. From the woods, a sound like fingernails on slate screeched, then silence. The villagers huddled behind bolted doors, praying. But the wind carried something to their windows, voices, pleading, "Come. Help me." The voices blended into the sibilant rustle of leaves, impossible to locate. Some recognized Tomas's voice, desperate and broken, crying for Helena. Others heard Marta calling for Lissa. In the hush before midnight, a pale blue glow pulsed at the base of the tree, an otherworldly heartbeat. No living thing could have made it. A madwoman, hair matted and eyes wild, stumbled from the forest edge and collapsed at the village's chapel, babbling about the tree's hungry mouth and cold heart. Her hands were claw-like, blackened as though she had crawled through charred earth. She scratched at her skull, tears of blood trailing down her cheeks. Before morning prayers, she lay still, skin sloughing from bone like old parchment. Fear burned through the village. Gates were barred, lanterns lit day and night, and guards set patrols, though none dared near the tree. Yet some felt it calling, a low hum beneath their ribs. Even the bravest found sleep unbearable, dreams of moss-covered mouths opening beneath their beds, roots wrapping tight around ankles, drawing them down into the damp, suffocating earth. Then the children began to whisper. 7-year-old Milla spoke of a wide path beneath the roots leading to a place of laughter and light. She claimed the tree promised to end the cold nightmares that haunted her slumber. Her mother laughed it off until Milla vanished one night, giggling, holding the rope barrier as though it had reached out for her. At dawn, her cradle was empty, her favorite rag doll lay face down in the dirt, its button eyes gouged out. Madness crept like ivy, consuming reason. A handful of desperate souls formed a plan to cut the tree down at dawn, to end its tyranny once and for all. They sharpened axes in secret, quarreled over leadership, and prayed to every saint in the ledger for courage. When the first sickly light of morning crept through the clouds, they marched, torches ablaze, axes slung over shoulders, into the forest. But as they arrived, the ground trembled, and a deep groan rumbled through the boughs. Ropes of root burst from the earth like serpents, hissing and writhing. One wrapped around the old blacksmith's axe handle, yanking it into the soil. The lamplighters dropped their torches. Flames danced up the trunk, but flickered out, as if smothered by an unseen breeze. A pale mist swirled at the base, forming shapes, faces contorted in agony, mouths agape in silent screams. The air grew thick, each breath tasting of rot and old blood. Panic rippled through the would-be heroes as they hacked at bark, but their blades passed through nothing but mist. The tree seemed to breathe, exhaling that icy fog which filled their lungs and burned their throats. One by one, they fell back, stumbling into each other, eyes rolling. Cries of pain and terror echoed until they ceased altogether. None were seen alive again. Only the torches lay scattered, dim embers guttering as though refusing to defy the darkness. By noon, the forest fell silent, oppressive. Branches arched overhead, blotting out the sky. Hidden somewhere within the grove, the missing villagers wandered, drawn inexorably deeper into the roots, their minds unraveling. No plea for help drifted back. No hint of where they had gone. Far overhead, nestled among the highest, gnarled limbs, the eternal tree seemed to watch with infinite patience, awaiting the next soul brave or desperate enough to seek its answers. In the village below, a hush settled, heavier than grief or fear, as if the people dared not breathe, lest the tree hear them and hunger anew. And somewhere in the silent wood, beyond rope and lantern, a distorted lullaby began. A child's gentle song, echoing under the roots, promising peace, promising release, promising truth. A week passed in uneasy silence. Every night, the distorted lullaby whispered through cracked shutters, drifting on a breeze that chilled the marrow. No one slept. Faces grew hollow, eyes darting toward the forest's edge, as though expecting some slow-motion apocalypse of gnarled roots and flickering blue light. Mothers clutched children close. Fathers sharpened whatever blade they could find, panic etched on their brows. But no plan could be drawn up. The tree's horror had already seeped into their dreams, turned courage to ash. On the 8th night, a small band of volunteers, those who had not yet been claimed, resolved to risk everything. They would descend beneath the tree, follow Milla's whispered path, and find their lost kin. At dusk they assembled. Marta, her face gaunt and lined with sorrow. Yarrick the woodcutter, hollow-eyed but determined. Sister Helena, the village nun, clutching a rosary she no longer believed in. And young Tomas's brother, Caspar, who refused to admit grief for the sister he still swore was alive somewhere below. Each carried a lantern, salted iron knives, and hoped that perhaps the tree's gift was worth its cost. They arrived at the root archway, where moss glowed silver in the torchlight. The hollow yawned like a throat, slick stones slick with dampness inviting them inward. Yarrick grabbed a root, expecting solid wood, but it slithered in his grip, like a serpent sensing fear. He recoiled, but Caspar pressed forward, lantern held high, following a narrow fissure in the floor. Thin air exhaled around them, perfumed with decay and the faint tang of tears. They crept downward, the path curving until the lantern's tremulous glow revealed a vast cavern. Stalactites dripped onto a black pool whose surface reflected nothing but darkness. Half buried in its shallows were matted dresses, boots, broken toys, the remains of those who had vanished. Marta staggered forward, groping for Lys's bonnet, but recoiled when a child's hand, pale as bone, reached up from the water and grasped her ankle. She screamed, wrenching free, and the hand withdrew, dragging a scrap of ribbon back beneath the surface. Helena prayed aloud, but her voice cracked. The pool's black mirror began to ripple. Faces, distorted, pale, pushed against the water's surface, mouths opening in silent pleas. One wore Ansel's wide, terrified eyes. Another was Milla, her empty button sockets like twin voids. Then the faces receded, the surface stilled, and a low rumble shook the cavern. Roots overhead shivered. From the far wall, a passage yawned into deeper darkness, outlined by faint phosphorescence. The lullaby echoed, louder now, beckoning. Come. It sang, voice pliant and sweet and monstrous. Caspar swallowed hard, his lantern flickering as he stepped forward, voice shaking. They're in there. They're calling. They followed the passage, squeezing past root pillars that dripped glistening sap. The walls writhed, as if alive, veins pulsing beneath translucent bark. Each step slid further from solidity, muscles ached, fear coagulated in throats. At last, they reached a domed chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. At its center rose the tree's heart, a colossal knot of twisted wood, throbbing with pale light like a dying star. Blood-red sap oozed from fissures, pooling on the floor to form a shallow lake. The air thrummed. Drawn forward like moths to flame, they stood before the heart. In the sap, they saw visions, heralds of joy denied and grief unending. Lissa dancing in a sunlit meadow, Ansel laughing as waves broke over him, Milla chasing butterflies through a field of asters. Each image shimmered, glossy, and perfect. Sister Helena reached for the sap with trembling fingers, whispering, "Release us," but Marta grabbed her wrist. "It's poison," she hissed. "This is their prison." Jarek's axe, strapped to his back, felt suddenly heavy. He tugged it free, the steel glinting in the ghost light. "I'll end this," he vowed, raising the blade. His knuckles whitened, but before he could strike, the heart convulsed. A thunderous crack split the air. Roots erupted from the floor and ceiling, coiling around his legs and arms, yanking him toward the pulsing knot. He screamed, blade clattering to the ground as one by one the roots tore into his flesh. Casper lunged to help, but a root lashed out, coiling around his throat. His lantern clattered, guttering. In the dimness, Helena and Marta watched in horror as Jarek's screams choked off, his body swallowed by the roots in a spurt of dark sap. Casper's eyes rolled back, he fell, limp, eyes open but unseeing. Marta fell to her knees, weeping as the tangled mass of roots writhed, digesting their sacrifice. Helena stumbled backward, wrenching Casper's body free of the root's grip. She cradled him, tears blurring the cavern's edges. But Casper's body stiffened and went cold. Marta reached for the sap lake, dripping her fingers with it, and pressed them to Casper's lips. He coughed, a weak, gurgling sound, then spoke in a voice that was not his own, "Stay. Stay with us." His eyes glowed from within, pupils replaced by black sap. Sister Helena screamed, pulling him away, dragging Marta toward the passage. But the tree's heart had sensed their betrayal. The cavern trembled, fissures cracking in the walls. Roots snaked in, seeking flesh, seeking fear, licking Jarek's discarded axe, seeping toward the sap lake, ready to seal them in forever. The lullaby swelled to a deafening chorus, a promise of peace that rang like a death knell. Helena shoved Marta into the narrow passage. "Go," she cried. Marta slipped into the darkness, the lullaby fading like a memory. Behind her, guns hatched deeper into the earth, a roar of tearing wood and the final crunch of bone. The passage narrowed, light swallowed by curve after curve. Marta ran, her lantern swinging wildly, heartbeat drumming in her ears. She emerged back into the cavern where the roots thrashed and writhed, but saw only Helena's silhouette, lantern held high. "Come," Helena mouthed as a colossal root smacked against the wall where Marta had just stood. She dashed forward, grabbing Helena's hand, and together they sprinted up the slope, adrenaline burning. The root tendrils lashed behind them, each swipe closer than the last, until they burst from the hollow arch into the night air. They collapsed on the forest floor, lungs heaving, eyes stinging with tears and sap. Behind them, the root arch collapsed with a thunderous crack, sealing the path. Leaves rustled. For a moment, all was still. Then a single, distant lullaby note drifted on the wind, a mockery of their escape. They returned to the village at dawn with hollow eyes and empty arms. No one greeted them, the villagers huddled behind locked doors, each haunted by the knowledge that some part of the tree remained unslain. Marta's bonnet lay on the threshold of her home, fluttering in a breeze she could not feel. Tomas's lantern, long extinguished, leaned against the gate. And in every window pane, in every puddle on the lane, that single note of lullaby lingered, echoing the tree's promise. We wait. The eternal tree still stands. Its roots press against the graves of the brave, its branches twist toward the sky like pleading hands. And in the long, sleepless nights, if you stand on the outskirts of the village and listen, you can still hear the lullaby, soft, insistent, deadly, calling you to come closer, to seek the truths that lie beneath. But be warned, the tree's answers are not given lightly. And once you enter, you may never find your way back. Thank you very much and see you all in the next video.